A veteran cop sexually harassed me at my new precinct, not knowing I was his commanding officer. Female sergeants made up less than 12% of our police force. At 28 and 5'3", I looked more like someone's daughter than their boss. I'd arranged to meet the captain 3 days before officially starting, wearing civilian clothes as requested. When I walked through the civilian entrance that Friday morning, I immediately felt the familiar dismissal. The desk officer barely glanced up from his phone before waving me toward the plastic chairs near the vending machines. I settled in to wait, observing how officers talked over the only female cop trying to brief them. Then this older cop with sergeant stripes started walking toward me. He looked annoyed when he noticed me sitting there. His eyes rolled as he approached, and he positioned himself directly in front of my chair. I had to crane my neck up to see his weathered face and graying mustache. He glanced at the duty board I'd been studying, then back at me with disgust. Let me guess, lost your purse? His tone dripped with condescension. I politely explained I was waiting for someone, keeping my voice professional and calm. He waved his hand dismissively and started explaining directions to the records department. Each word came out slower than the last, like I couldn't understand basic English. My chest burned with that familiar feeling I'd endured for years. When I quietly mentioned I had law enforcement experience, his whole demeanor shifted. He laughed so loudly that 2 officers by the coffee machine turned to look. $10 says she's one of those criminology students who thinks watching CSI makes them a cop. He made a theatrical show of pulling out his wallet and waving it at the desk officer. The younger cop grinned and shook his head, clearly enjoying the entertainment. The older cop started listing all the wannabes he'd seen come through over the years. Security guards, bail bondsmen, process servers, all thinking they understood real police work. The other officers were chuckling now, and more started paying attention to his performance. He suddenly pulled out his notepad and started drawing stick figures. I watched him sketch a tall figure with a badge and a tiny one with a purse. Let me explain how a police station works since you're clearly confused. He held up a drawing like he was teaching kindergarten, making sure the growing audience could see. 2 more cops had wandered over from the break room to watch the show. He pointed at each stick figure with exaggerated slowness, then started adding arrows and buildings. The whole time he narrated about where civilians go versus where real cops work. Someone behind me snorted with laughter. My fingernails dug into my palms, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm actually just here for a scheduled meeting, I said calmly, trying once more to defuse the situation. He ignored my attempt at civility and continued his show. After his kindergarten presentation, I stood up to leave. He immediately sidestepped to block my path, his hand landing heavy on my shoulder. When I tried to step away, his grip tightened hard enough to hurt. His fingers dug in through my shirt. Did I say you could leave? His voice had changed completely from mocking to threatening. He called over his shoulder to the other officers about having a hostile one. His hand stayed locked on my shoulder while his free hand drummed against his handcuffs. He explained how I could spend the weekend in holding for disrespecting an officer. The judge wouldn't see me until Monday, he said with satisfaction. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face completely neutral. I really do have a meeting with the captain, I said evenly, giving him one last chance. Instead of backing off, he escalated further. When I tried to pull away, he grabbed my wrist and yanked me back roughly. I said, "You're not going anywhere." He leaned in close, far too close, and his breath felt hot against my neck. He inhaled deeply and made this low, appreciative sound that made my skin crawl. "You smell expensive, sweet, like you taste good too." My stomach lurched with revulsion. He suggested I wait for his shift to end for a private tour of the station. His free hand touched my hip, and I jerked back instinctively. His grip on my wrist only tightened painfully in response. He whispered about knowing which car was mine in the parking lot. He could follow me home, he said. Make sure I got there safe. "Young thing like you needs protection. I could protect you real good." The other officers had suddenly found urgent paperwork that needed their attention. 20 years on the force, he bragged while holding me captive. This was his house, and I was in it now. Right then, the captain's door opened. "Sorry I'm late for our meeting, Sergeant." He stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene before him. His officer had my wrist in a vice grip, our bodies too close. The room fell completely silent. "Officer, remove your hand from my new sergeant, now." The captain's voice could have frozen hell. The blood drained from the officer's face so fast I thought he might faint. His hand dropped from my wrist like I was made of molten lava. The room stayed dead silent as I straightened my shirt and pulled out my badge. "Sergeant Miller, I start Monday." His badge clattered on the floor when he tried to unclip it. Sweat dripped down his face. The captain's office door kept opening. Officers filing in, heads down. Tuesday morning, 3 female officers waited outside my door. They'd been too scared before. 6 months later at the mall, he ducked behind a kiosk when our eyes met. Security uniform instead of blues. He'd asked where I was going that day. The answer was simple, straight to the top.